Number 24 is one of those unpaired evidence questions. These are not very common. There's only maybe 1 or 2 per SAT, and they don't really change things that much. But the reason I'm including number 25 is that sometimes these questions, especially when they're near the beginning of a passage, tend to break the chronology rule. And I just wanted to point that out because I think it sometimes can throw people off when they start a passage and then they start to doubt themselves about the chronology rule throughout the rest of the questions, and that I don't want that to happen because sometimes there is an exception and we don't want to then change our entire strategy because the one time we hit an exception, right? It works 85% of the time. That's really good. These are a place though where sometimes it breaks down. So if I were using the chronology rule, that would mean using this line reference for 25 to help inform me about the line reference for number 24. So it probably means that if the chronology rule holds, that choice A is the most likely answer to be correct because it's the one that comes before line 20. The questions are supposed to be in order. So that might be where you're leaning. But we should always do the question and make sure we have even more proof than just like this rule. We want to use this as a guide, but we always want to still try to do the question as best we can. So in this case, we are still going to follow the QLC method, and the question here is very, very important. It tells us exactly what we need to look for in these lines. So let's make sure we understand it. Which choice provides the best evidence for the claim that Moore's group was surprised to observe salt stretching? So I'm underlining these things because I want to make sure I'm keeping them in mind, and the word that does the most work for me here is that word surprised. If that word were in an answer choice on a normal question, I would say that that's a strong word. That's a strong that needs to be proven by the line reference. Here it's a little bit in reverse, right? We have it in the question and we need a line reference that supports it. It does a lot of work. It is a strong word. So anything that indicates surprise is going to be a good sign. So now let's just go to these line references and sort through, right? So lines 17 to 18. So that is right here. It says, but scientists don't expect this superplasticity in a rigid crystalline material like salt, Moore says. So that's accomplishing a lot of goals. It's talking about more. It's talking about something not being expected, therefore it might be surprising. So I don't know anything about superplasticity and crystalline material, but I don't care. Right now this is checking off the 2 non-scientific things that my question needs it to do. So that's looking pretty good. It's 2 check marks of the 3 that I'm looking for. I would say that that's a good sign, and plus it does follow the chronology rule, but we should check and make sure the other choices, aren't better. So let's look at choice B, 26 to 28. That's going to be right here. It says they were investigating how water sticks to a surface such as salt and created a super dry salt sample for testing. Okay, they are probably more in his group. This seems to be something about stretching. Because of the stickiness. I don't really know, but it doesn't say anything about it being surprising, so that's not a great sign. So maybe this is only 1 check of the ideas that I really want to match with the question. So not as good as A. Let's look at C, 36 to 38. That's right here. Using an electron microscope to see what was happening, the researchers observed the nanowires. Well, that's doing something that the SAT loves to try to mess with us on. They're using that word observed, which we can see is also in the question, right? Observed. This is what I would call a copy-paste trap. We see a word in the choice or in the question that is also in the line reference, and it's the exact word. They literally just copied and pasted it. This isn't always wrong, but it's not always right either, and I think that that's the key, is our brains really like things that are similar. And so we're drawn to these kinds of situations where they've copied a word and it's the same word, especially if it's science and we don't really understand what a lot of the words mean. We're drawn to these familiar choices, these familiar phrases. And so that's okay, but we always have to double check that there's not something else going on. We need to look for all of the ideas. And right now, I'm not really seeing anything about it being surprising. This is just kind of telling me there was something that was observed. I'm confused by the science, but I'm not confused about the idea of surprise. That's not there. So this is not a good choice. This feels suspicious to me. It feels like a trap. But let's look at D, 55 to 56. That's going to be here. Sodium chloride is everywhere, in the air, in our bodies, Moore says. Is that it? Is that the whole thing? 55, 56, yeah. Well, that doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything about what they observed, what they're surprised by, salt stretching. That just seems completely random. So here's the deal. I don't need to really understand the in-depth science here. So I'm going to pick A. It matches with enough of the things that I'm looking for that I'd be pretty confident that's right. It talks about surprise, which is a big, strong word in that question that I really, really wanted to find in the choices, and I only found it in one. One choice had that idea, and that's a big idea, so that's a really good sign. They all seem to be talking about Moore's group, and they all seem to be talking about salt stretching in some way. Enough that I would be pretty confident that it's good enough. It matches. If I want to go back, I can. Superplasticity, well, hopefully that word plasticity is kind of familiar to us. I know that that is a tough vocab word, but it means if something is plastic, it doesn't just mean that it's like the material. It also can mean more generally if something is plastic, it is stretchy, it is bendable, it is pliable, and so here we are kind of talking about stretching in that way. But I don't think you need that in order to confidently pick A. And yes, on top of all the stuff that we did for the question, it also is exactly what we expected to be the answer based on the chronology rule. So in this case, it did not break the chronology rule, it followed it. And that's helpful. It's reassuring to me that I'm probably on the right track, even if I'm not 100% sure that my answer does exactly what it's supposed to. There's a lot of check marks. The chronology rule adds a check mark and gives you confidence. That's why I really like that rule, is it can come in handy. But I just wanted to prepare you that it might have broken it here, and so we don't want to only rely on that. We want to also rely on the question itself and the lines and the passage and the rest of our strategies.